It's after 2 in the morning on a rural road in Minnesota. A father is driving alone through the dark, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his phone. On the other end of the line, his 19-year-old son is walking along a gravel road, breathing a little harder, describing fences, fields, and the faint sound of rushing water. For 47 minutes, they stay connected. 2 points of light moving through the night, never quite finding each other. And then, without warning, the boy says, "Oh shit." The line goes quiet. Tonight, we're going to reconstruct what happened before and after that moment. The final phone call of Brandon Swanson. The search that grew wider and stranger with every hour, the theories born from an empty riverbank, and the law that now carries his name. Because Brandon didn't disappear in the middle of nowhere. He vanished while his father was listening. Brandon, the family, and the landscape. Marshall, Minnesota. A town of around 13 or 14,000 people, planted in the middle of farm country. Out there, the land feels like it never really ends. Fields, silos, and thin lines of trees break up a flat horizon. Roads are long and straight. At night, if you turn off your engine and lights, you can hear nothing but the wind and the insects. This is where Brandon Victor Swanson grew up. Brandon was born on January 30th, 1989. He lived with his parents, Brian and Annette, and his little sister. By every description that survives him, he was a good kid, a reader, a science nerd, the kind of teen who spends more time with textbooks and video games than with trouble. He wore glasses, thin frames over soft features and a big smile. Some reports say he was legally blind in one eye, something he worked around but never escaped. On bright days, it was a minor inconvenience. At night, on dark roads, it could make depth and distance harder to judge. In 2007, Brandon graduated from Marshall High School. Instead of leaving the area right away, he enrolled at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in the town of Canby, about 35 miles away. There, he studied wind energy, part of the growing renewables industry just starting to take shape in the Midwest. He didn't have a wild reputation. Friends remember him as responsible, a bit quiet, and very close to his family. He still lived at home. He commuted to class. He planned ahead. He was talking about where to go next in his education, where he might move, what kind of work he wanted to do. Everything about his life pointed forward. To understand how he could vanish, you also have to picture the place itself. Southwestern Minnesota is a patchwork of open land and tiny towns. Marshall, Lind, Taunton, Porter, Canby. By day, it's simple. Highways cut through farm fields. County roads branch off like veins, many of them gravel. But at night, with little light pollution, the sky goes black and the ground turns into a maze. If you're driving a familiar highway and stay on it, nothing is complicated. But if you turn off onto the back roads, every corner looks like the last, and distances stretch. A few degrees off course can put you miles from where you think you are. On May 13th, 2008, that landscape and Brandon's ordinary life collided in a way nobody has been able to fully explain. It was the last day of classes at Minnesota West. Spring semester was over. Brandon had completed his first year of the program. Like a lot of students, he planned to celebrate. Early that evening, he went to a small get-together in Lind, a town about 7 miles southwest of Marshall. It wasn't a wild party, more like a hangout. Later in the evening, he drove northwest to Canby for another gathering with classmates. There, friends would later say, he had a few drinks. 1 beer, maybe 2, maybe a bit more. No one reported seeing him stumbling, slurring, or unable to drive. Sometime around midnight, Brandon said goodbye and left Canby to head back to his parents' house in Marshall. The drive should have been simple. It was a route he knew well. Highway 68, a straight east-west line between Canby and Marshall, about 30-40 minutes on the road. But that night, for reasons we can't fully know, he didn't stay on the main highway. The car in the ditch and the first strange signs. Just before 2 in the morning, most sources place the call at around 1:54 a.m. Brian and Annette Swanson's phone rang. On the line was Brandon. He told them he'd driven into a ditch on a back road. His car, a green Chevy Lumina, had gone slightly off the gravel, the undercarriage catching in on the edge so the wheels couldn't get traction. He wasn't injured. There was no mention of serious damage. He just needed help getting the car back on the road. Brandon said he was close to home, somewhere near Lind. For his parents, that made sense. The area between Lind and Marshall was familiar. It was a short trip. They didn't panic. Brian and Annette got into their pickup truck and pulled out into the night, leaving their house behind in darkness. They kept Brandon on the phone as they drove. At first, everyone assumed this would be quick. Drive out, pull the car, go home. But the first warning that something was off came almost immediately. Brian and Annette reached the area they thought Brandon was describing and pulled over. Through the phone, they asked him to flash his headlights so they could find him. Brandon did. Inside their truck, they could hear the tiny click of his turn signal stalk, the soft thump of his hand against the steering wheel as he moved around. But outside the windshield, the field stayed black. They couldn't see his headlights anywhere. So they tried the opposite. Brian and Annette flashed their own lights, high beams stabbing into the darkness. They honked their horn. On the phone, they asked, "Do you see us? Do you hear us?" On the other end of the line, Brandon said no, he couldn't see their lights. He couldn't hear their horn. To him, it felt like they were in the wrong place. To them, it felt like he was. For several minutes, they repeated this strange ritual. Drive a little farther, flash lights, honk, listen to Brandon doing the same, and find nothing. The road they were on matched what Brandon described. Fields on both sides, no buildings immediately near, just open country. Everything fit, except for the fact that they were invisible to each other. It should have been impossible. In a flat rural landscape, two vehicles on nearby roads, both using headlights and horns, should notice each other easily. Tension started to build. Brandon grew frustrated that his parents weren't finding him. Brian and Annette, in turn, became frustrated that he might not be describing his location accurately. At one point, Brandon's irritation boiled over. He snapped at his mother, and the call ended abruptly. Annette immediately called back and apologized. Brandon did the same. Everyone tried to calm down and think. The solution they came up with would later become the core of the mystery. Looking ahead, Brandon told his parents he could see the glow of town lights in the distance. To him, those lights were Lind. He said he would leave the stuck car and start walking toward them. Meanwhile, Brian and Annette would drive to Lind, to the parking lot of a bar on the edge of town, a clear landmark. They would meet there. Brian turned the truck toward Lind. Annette wasn't feeling well, so after a while he dropped her at home and continued alone. All the while, he stayed on the phone with Brandon, keeping that lifeline open as they moved towards what they both believed was the same destination. From that point on, Brandon was on foot. He left the security of the car and stepped into the dark. The walk, the call, and the silence. Imagine for a moment being in Brian's position. It's the middle of the night. The dashboard clock creeps past 2:15 a.m., the radio is off. There are no other headlights on the road. On your ear, pressed against the phone, is the sound of your son's voice. And underneath it, the grainy, repetitive crunch of his feet on gravel. For the next 40-plus minutes, that's what Brian hears. As Brandon walks, he continues to talk. Some of it is navigation. He describes the road, the fields, the distant lights he's aiming for. Some of it is regular conversation. Little comments, family talk, the kind of quiet, sleepy chat you fall into when you're both tired but trying to stay alert. Soon, he tells his dad he's turning off the road, cutting across fields to reach town more directly. He mentions coming up to a fence line, then another. Somewhere out there, he says, he can hear water, maybe a creek or a river. Brian keeps driving. The road bends and branches. He does his best to match Brandon's words to the map in his head. When Brandon says he's passing a field, Brian looks for that field. When Brandon says he hears water, Brian looks for a crossing, a culvert, something. But there's a problem neither of them knows yet. The town Brandon thinks he's walking toward isn't where he is. He is not near Lind. He is miles away, near Taunton and Porter. So every step he takes, every faint light on the horizon and he thinks is familiar, is actually pulling him deeper into nowhere. The call continues. Some accounts mention that Brandon left his glasses in the car. If that's true, then as he walks, he's relying on imperfect night vision, in a place with almost no artificial light. Out there, one misjudged step can mean the difference between solid ground and a hidden drop. According to the phone records, the call between father and son lasts about 47 minutes. At some point during that window, Brandon's route brings him close to a body of water. Investigators later connect this to the Yellow Medicine River, or one of its branches, based on where scent dogs track his trail. He mentions the sound to his father, but nothing in his voice suggests he feels an immediate danger. Then, near the end of the call, it happens. Brian is driving, still searching, when Brandon's words suddenly stop mid-sentence. There's a half second, and then Brandon says, "Oh shit," and that's it. No crash, no scream, no splash that Brian can clearly identify, just that startled exclamation and then silence. Brian calls his son's name into the phone, over and over. At first, the line is still open, but Brandon doesn't answer. So, Brian hangs up and calls back. The phone rings. Rings. No one picks up. He calls again and again. For a while, it continues to ring, going to voicemail only after multiple attempts. If the phone had fallen straight into deep water, many people argue, you might expect a different sound, or no ringing at all. Somewhere in that empty landscape, Brandon's phone is ringing in the night, lying on the ground, or in his hand, or in a place we still haven't found. Brian keeps driving, now in panic. He retraces roads, checks side tracks, looks for any sign of movement. Back at home, Annette is calling Brandon's friends. Some come out to join the impromptu search. They drive the roads around Lind, around Marshall, around the area they think he must be in. Nothing. The sky slowly lightens. Sunrise creeps across the fields. Brandon Swanson does not appear on the road to Lind. He does not walk into the bar parking lot. He does not call back. By around 6:30 a.m., Brian and Annette do what any parent in their position would do. They call the police. And here, the nightmare turns into something else. Instead of immediate mobilization, officers tell them that Brandon is 19, that this kind of thing, staying out all night after the last day of college, isn't unusual. That, as one officer would later be quoted, Brandon is an adult and has a right to be missing. They know in their gut that this is not a kid sleeping on a friend's couch. They push, they insist. They explain about the ditch, the walk, the final words, and the deadline. Hours pass before a full official search begins. In those hours, whatever happened to Brandon is already done. The map changes and the search explodes. When law enforcement finally obtains Brandon's cell phone records, a new layer of strangeness appears. Every call Brandon made to his parents that night hit a cell tower not near Lind, but near Taunton and Porter, northwest of Marshall along Highway 68, roughly 25 miles from where he believed he was. Brandon had been wrong about his location the entire time. With this new information, the focus of the search moves. Deputies and volunteers head toward the area where the signal places him. They drive gravel roads, scan ditches, and finally, around midday on May 14th, they find it. Brandon's green Chevy Lumina. The car is on a gravel road just north of Highway 68, near the border of Lincoln, Lyon, and Yellow Medicine counties. It's in a shallow ditch, high-centered, resting on its frame so that the drive wheels have poor contact with the ground. The kind of situation where you can rev the engine all you want, but the car isn't going anywhere. Just as Brandon described. The car doors are closed or slightly ajar. The keys are missing. There's no sign of Brandon nearby. No obvious blood, no shattered glass, no clothing or backpack tossed aside. In the bright light of day, the same kind of fields he described the night before stretch out on all sides. From here, the operation escalates. Deputies organize grid searches around the car. Volunteers on foot and on ATVs fan out. Helicopters and planes sweep over the area, looking for a body, a piece of clothing, anything. Scent dogs are brought in. They pick up Brandon's smell at the car and begin to follow it. The route they trace largely matches his father's memory of the call. From the car, the dogs move along a series of gravel roads. Then, at some point, they veer off into fields, crossing the landscape in a diagonal path that seems to mirror Brandon's decision to cut across rather than stick to the road. They encounter fence lines. They pass through them. They continue toward water. Eventually, at least one dog leads its handler to the bank of a river. The Yellow Medicine. For people hearing this for the first time, the connection is immediate. Brandon, walking in the dark, hearing water in the distance, saying, "Oh shit," and then going silent. Did he fall into the river? Search teams drag sections of the Yellow Medicine. They use boats and, at times, divers. They work both up and downstream from where the dogs led them. They find nothing. One handler later reports that the dog picked up the scent on the far side of the river and continued along that bank, heading toward a gravel road near the county line before the trail faded. If that's accurate, it would suggest Brandon may have successfully crossed the river, either at a shallow point or on a natural crossing, and continued walking. But the water is muddy, the banks are uneven, and early reports differ. In the absence of clear physical evidence, several scenarios remain on the table. Weeks pass. The official search slows, but it doesn't stop. Sheriff's deputies continue to walk riverbanks. The Swansons leave their porch light on every night, a wordless signal that they're still waiting. In the fall, when crops are harvested and fields open up, searches resume. Then again in the spring, after snowmelt but before planting. Year after year, the pattern repeats. By 2011, somewhere around 120 square miles of land has been checked, by foot, by vehicle, by air. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension steps in as lead agency. A dedicated tip line is set up. Dozens of calls come in over the years. None of them lead to Brandon. What they do lead to is a set of competing explanations. Theories. River, land, foul play, and the unknown. When a body is not found and the last moments are heard but unseen, the human mind starts generating possibilities. In Brandon Swanson's case, most theories fall into 4 main categories. The river took him. The first and most intuitive theory is also the simplest. Brandon slipped into the Yellow Medicine River and drowned. It fits several pieces of the puzzle. He was walking at night in an area with uneven ground and water nearby. He talked about hearing running water. His last words sounded like a reaction to something sudden and bad. The dogs appear to have traced his scent toward the riverbank. If he stepped off a soft edge into deeper water, the shock and cold could have pulled him under before he could react. But the river theory has big problems. Despite repeated searches over years, dragging, divers, bank sweeps, no body or personal items have surfaced. The Yellow Medicine in that area isn't a huge, raging torrent. It has depth and current, but not the kind of unstoppable force you'd expect to carry a body miles away without leaving a trace. Brandon's mother, in particular, has said she doesn't believe he's in the river, pointing to the dog trail that seemed to continue on the far side. Others point out that if the phone had gone straight into deep water, it might not have continued to ring for as long as it reportedly did. So, while the river can't be ruled out, it doesn't fully close the case. A fall, hypothermia, or a hidden trap in the land. The second cluster of theories focuses on the terrain itself. May nights in Minnesota can still be cold, especially for someone walking for an hour or more, possibly damp, possibly tired, and maybe a little disoriented from alcohol and darkness. Brandon was wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and layers, but hypothermia doesn't always require below-freezing temperatures. It can creep up when someone is exhausted, injured, or wet. Combine that with the possibility of an unseen hazard. An old, unmarked well. A collapsed animal burrow. An unused farm pit. A deep drainage ditch or culvert hidden by grass. In this scenario, after his exclamation, Brandon could have fallen into something narrow and deep, or collapsed from injury and cold in a spot easy to miss. Over the years, his remains might have been scattered by animals or broken apart by farm equipment working the fields. This theory would explain why no clear body was found, but it also runs into the same uncomfortable reality. With so much land searched so many times, it feels like something should have surfaced. A bone, a shoe, the phone. Unless the exact spot where he ended up is one of the few places nobody has ever looked, or a place that physically hides everything that falls into it. The rural Midwest is full of those quiet, dangerous spaces that locals know to avoid, and that a tired 19-year-old, walking in the dark without glasses, might not. Foul play, someone in the dark. Anytime a young person vanishes, there's talk of foul play. A stranger on a back road, a hit and run, someone stopping to offer help, then doing something else entirely. It's not impossible here. Brandon was on foot in the middle of the night. A passing driver could have seen him, picked him up, or hit him and panicked. Someone could have hidden a body in a place the official search never touched. But this theory clashes with what we know from the search. There were no obvious signs of a collision along the routes investigated. No scraps of plastic, no broken glass, no skid marks that tied clearly to a recent impact. The dog trail seems to trace a lone walker's path, not someone being forced into a vehicle at the roadside. The area has a relatively low violent crime rate, and there are no known similar attacks in that immediate region at that time. Law enforcement has said they can't rule out foul play, but they don't have evidence to support it either. It's a possibility that hangs around the edges of the case rather than sitting at its center. For some people, particularly those suspicious of initial police handling or skeptical of search accuracy, foul play offers a kind of emotional explanation. Something deliberate happened, but like the other theories, it remains unproven. He chose to disappear. The last major idea is the one almost everyone who knew Brandon rejects. In this scenario, Brandon used the stuck car as a starting point to stage his own disappearance. He walks away, fakes the call or part of it, and uses the confusion to vanish into a planned new life. But why call his parents for help at all then? Why deliberately place himself in the middle of an emergency search pattern that would quickly involve multiple counties and, later, the FBI and National Missing Persons databases? He had no known history of running away, no clear financial or psychological motive, and no confirmed sightings after that night. If Brandon Swanson somehow managed to walk away from his own life, he did it without leaving a single breadcrumb in 17 years. Most investigators, and his own family, see this as extremely unlikely. Which leaves us with something even worse than a clear tragedy. A story where every path out of the field is blocked, and yet there is no body, no crime scene, and no final answer. Brandon's Law and the light left on. Out of all this uncertainty, one thing did come into focus. The way Brandon's disappearance was handled, the initial dismissal, the delay in serious search efforts, terrified and angered his parents. They understood that officers see a lot of cases where young adults stay out all night and come back on their own. But they also knew that sometimes a parent's intuition isn't just fear, it's data. Annette and Brian Swanson took that anger to the state legislature. Working with Representative Marty Seifert, whose district included Marshall, they pushed for a change in how Minnesota treats missing adults. The result was what's now commonly known as Brandon's Law. Under this law, when a person of any age is reported missing under suspicious or dangerous circumstances, law enforcement has to begin an investigation promptly. They can't simply refuse to take a report based on the person's age, the assumption that they might have left voluntarily, or the short amount of time since they were last seen. The law also clarifies jurisdiction. In Brandon's case, his car was found right where several counties meet, which caused confusion about who was in charge. Now, the county where the person was last known to reside can take the lead if the exact last seen location is uncertain. Brandon's Law was signed in 2009. Since then, other states have looked at similar measures, recognizing that the first hours in a missing person case can be the difference between rescue and recovery, or between recovery and nothing at all. It's a bitter victory for a family that still doesn't have their son. For years after Brandon vanished, the Swansons kept their front porch light on every night. Neighbors and visitors knew what it meant, that Brandon, in their minds, was still out there somewhere, that if he ever found his way home, or if someone brought news, the house would not be dark. Behind every law named for a missing person, there's a story like that porch light, something kept alive in the hope that it might still guide someone back. The call that never ends. So, what really happened that night? Here's what we know. A 19-year-old college student left a friend's house on a route he drove often. His car ended up in a shallow ditch on a gravel road miles from where he thought he was. He called his parents. They tried, and failed, to find him. They listened to him walk through the dark, across fields and fences, past the sound of running water. After 47 minutes on the phone with his father, he reacted to something we can't see. "Oh shit." Then, silence. No struggle heard, no clear scream, no second chance. By the time a real search began, the trail had already started to cool. Years of effort, hundreds of volunteers, dogs and divers and detectives turned up a car, some route traces and a law. But not Brandon. Somewhere between that last word and the first ring that went unanswered, his story fell into a gap. A river, a hole, a moment of violence, or a simple patch of bad luck so perfect that nobody has been able to reconstruct it. We started this video with a father driving in the dark, listening to his son on the phone. We ended with another image, a small house in Marshall, Minnesota. A porch light glowing into the night. Inside, a family that has learned more about legal statutes and cell tower pings than they ever wanted to. Outside, the same flat fields, the same gravel roads, the same rivers. Somewhere out there, the missing minutes of Brandon Swanson's call still live, spread out across ditches and fence lines and water. Maybe, one day, a hunter, a farmer, or a construction worker will uncover something that closes the gap. Maybe technology will catch up in some way we can't predict. Or maybe this will remain what it has been for nearly 2 decades, a story that ends in mid-sentence. As you put your phone down after this video, remember this. Brandon did exactly what we are all told to do when something goes wrong. He called home, he stayed on the line. He trusted that as long as his father could hear him, he wasn't really alone. 47 minutes later, he was gone. And somewhere, under an open Midwestern sky, there is still a place where a single step turned a routine drive into a mystery that refuses to die. The unusual disappearance of Angela Hammond, the last call. On a warm April night in 1991, a young woman stands alone in the glow of a payphone in small-town Missouri. She's 20 years old, 4 months pregnant, and on the line with her fiancé, only 7 blocks away. As they talk, she mentions a truck, an old 2-tone green pickup circling the block again and again. In the driver's seat, a filthy, bearded man who won't stop watching her. Minutes later, her fiancé hears her scream. Then, a stranger's voice comes through the line. I didn't need to use the phone anyway. The call cuts. Her car is found abandoned by the booth. Her fiancé races toward her, passes a truck, hears her scream his name from the passenger seat, and then his own car breaks down during the chase. Tonight, we're going to walk through those final minutes, step by step, and we're going to look at why, 30-plus years later, police believe that Angela Hammond may not have been the woman her kidnappers meant to take. Clinton, Angela, and Rob. To understand how disturbing Angela's disappearance is, you have to understand where it happened. Clinton, Missouri, in 1991, was the definition of a quiet Midwestern town. A courthouse square, a few churches, a handful of small businesses. People waved to each other on the street. Kids rode their bikes after dark. Violent crime existed mostly as something you heard about on the evening news, happening somewhere else. Angela Marie Hammond grew up in that world. Friends described her as outgoing, fun, and kind. She had curly brown blonde hair, warm brown eyes, and a small scar on her upper lip. She wasn't tall, just under 5 feet, but she had a big personality. She liked to talk, to laugh, to be around people. By 1991, Angela's life seemed to be falling into place. She worked nights as a processor at Union State Bank, checking and sorting financial paperwork. During the day, she took classes at Central Missouri State University, trying to build a future beyond her hometown without really leaving it. She still spent a lot of time with her mother, Marcia, who was proud of her daughter's independence, but also deeply attached to her. Angela was also in love. She'd started dating Rob Schaefer, a former high school athlete, the kind of guy who knew everyone from sports and school. Rob planned to join the military that summer. Angela teased him about the haircut he'd have to get. Then, in early 1991, Angela told Rob she was pregnant. By all accounts, he was happy. He proposed not long after. They moved in together to a small trailer in Clinton and started talking about baby names, about weddings, about where life might take them next. On February 9, 1991, Angela turned 20. Her friends and family threw a small celebration. No one knew that in less than 2 months she would vanish. There was something else hanging over Missouri that winter and spring, something that wouldn't make sense until later. On January 19, 1991, about 70 miles away in the town of Max Creek, a convenience store clerk named Trudy Darby called her son to say there was a suspicious man outside the store. When he arrived 10 minutes later, she was gone. 2 days after that, her body was found. She had been raped and shot. On February 27th in Nevada, Missouri, another clerk, Cheryl Ann Kenny, locked up her store for the night and vanished. Her car was still in the parking lot. She has never been found. Most people in Clinton were aware of these cases, but for many, they were background noise. The kind of terrible thing that happens out there, even if out there was only an hour or two away. On April 4th, 1991, a Thursday, Angela and Rob planned an ordinary evening. There was a barbecue at her mother's house. They ate, joked, and talked about their baby and their future. As the night got later, they left together in Angela's car. Rob needed to babysit his younger brother at his parents' house. Angela drove him there, dropped him off around 9 to 10 p.m., and promised to call in a few hours so they could meet up again once his mother came home. It was one of those small, everyday arrangements couples make without thinking. A quick phone call later, a short drive back, nothing dramatic. At least, that was the plan. The first strange signs. After leaving Rob, Angela didn't go straight home. In that part of Missouri, in the early 90s, it was common for young adults to spend evenings just driving around, talking, listening to music. Angela picked up a friend, often referred to as Kyla in later accounts, and the two spent roughly an hour cruising Clinton's quiet streets, doing nothing in particular. By around 11:15 p.m., Angela was tired. She still had to call Rob like she'd promised. Since she and Rob didn't have a phone line in their trailer, payphones were a regular part of their routine. So she pulled into a lot near the Food Barn grocery store, close to the center of town, where there were a couple of payphones set up near the street. The intersection was 2nd Street and Jefferson Street, only 7 blocks or so from where Rob was babysitting. The square around her was calm. A few darkened storefronts, streetlights casting small yellow pools, and the occasional passing car. Angela parked her car, stepped into one of the booths and dialed. When Rob picked up, it was just a normal conversation. She told him she was too tired to stay out much longer. Instead of picking him up to go do something, she'd head back to their trailer, take a bath, and call it a night. They joked, they chatted about nothing. Then Angela mentioned something. A truck. She said there was an older green pickup that kept circling the block. She described it to Rob as a 2-tone green Ford, the kind you'd expect to see in the late 60s or early 70s. The most memorable detail was the rear window, a large mural like a painting of water or a nature scene with fish. The truck went past once, twice, again. At first, it was just a detail, something to comment on, but as it continued to circle, Angela's tone changed. She told Rob the driver was a filthy, bearded man. Sources usually describe him as white, wearing overalls or coveralls, a dark baseball cap, glasses, a beard, and a mustache. At some point, the truck finally pulled into the lot where Angela was. The man got out and went to the other payphone, just a few feet away from her. He lifted the receiver, did something with it, whether he actually dialed or not is unclear, and then hung up. He walked back to his truck. You can imagine how this must have felt for Angela. It's late, you're alone, heavily pregnant, on the phone, and there's a dirty stranger pacing around near you in a mostly empty downtown. But nothing openly criminal has happened yet. A moment later, the man stepped out of his truck again. This time, he had a flashlight. He started shining it under the truck, around the ground, into the bed, like someone who'd lost something and was trying to find it in the dark. According to some retellings, Angela found this odd, but still possibly harmless. Maybe he'd dropped his keys. Maybe his phone really had a problem. On the other end of the line, Rob listened to the play-by-play. He suggested that maybe the man needed the phone she was using. Maybe the other payphone wasn't working. Ask if he needs to use it, Rob told her. So, Angela did. She called out to the man, asking if he needed the phone. He answered briefly, something along the lines of, "No, I'll try the other one again." His voice was gruff, but there was no immediate threat in his words. Rob wasn't there to see it. He only had Angela's descriptions and the slight shift in her voice. Their conversation drifted back to normal topics. When she would head home, what time they'd see each other tomorrow. Angela probably thought the strange man with the flashlight was just another odd person in a small town. Annoying, creepy maybe, but not life-threatening. She had no way of knowing that the man had already made up his mind. The abduction and the failed rescue. Imagine being in Rob's place. You're stretched out halfway on the couch, halfway watching TV, halfway listening to your pregnant fiancée talk from a payphone you could jog to in a few minutes. The conversation goes on. Then, in an instant, everything changes. Angela lets out a scream. It's sudden enough that Rob doesn't understand what he hears at first. There's a crash, the sound of the receiver hitting something. Some versions of the story mention banging against the metal side of the booth. Then a male voice comes through the line, calm and cold. "I didn't need to use the phone anyway." The call dies. For a second or two, Rob tries to process what happened. Then adrenaline hits. He drops the phone, runs out the door, grabs his keys, and jumps into his car. It's important to remember, Angela is not across town. She's not miles away. She's 7 blocks from him. He believes, with good reason, that if he moves fast enough, he might be able to stop whatever's happening. He tears through Clinton's quiet streets, headlights cutting across houses where people are already asleep. As he approaches the area of the payphones, something happens that he'll replay in his mind for the rest of his life. Coming toward him in the opposite lane is an old green pickup truck, two-tone paint. A mural on the back window. In the passenger seat, he sees a woman. He believes it's Angela, and he hears his name. Angela screams, "Rob!" as the truck passes. In that instant, everything locks into place for him. The truck she described, the man with the beard, the scream on the phone, and now this. He slams on his brakes and throws his car into reverse to swing around and chase the pickup. In doing that, he unknowingly damages his transmission. An automatic doesn't like being forced from drive into reverse while in motion. The gears grind. The car lurches. But at first it still moves. Now it's a chase. The green pickup accelerates away from town, headlights cutting through the dark. Rob pushes his wounded car as hard as he can, following it out along 2nd Street, then onto Culvert Drive and beyond, into more rural roads. He reportedly manages to stay behind the truck for roughly 2 miles, but the damage to his transmission is catching up. As he makes a sharp right turn, the gears finally give out. The engine revs. The car barely responds. The truck pulls away, its taillight shrinking and then disappearing into the night. Rob is left on the side of the road with a broken car and the knowledge that his pregnant fiancée has just been dragged into a stranger's vehicle in front of him. Back in town, when police arrive at the payphones, they find Angela's car still in the lot. The door is closed. There are no obvious signs of a struggle beyond what Rob described hearing through the phone. The payphone is just hanging there, silent. In the next hours, Clinton goes from a quiet town winding down for the night to a community in full emergency mode. Officers fan out. Roadblocks are discussed and, according to some accounts, briefly attempted. But in a rural area with numerous back roads, it's all too easy to disappear. By morning, Angela is officially listed as a missing person believed abducted. Suspicion on Rob. In almost every missing persons investigation, the closest partner is scrutinized first. Rob's story, on its face, sounds almost too dramatic. The phone call, the scream, the chilling statement, the chase, the conveniently broken transmission at the exact moment he's about to catch up. Investigators did what investigators do. They took his full statement. They examined his car. They gave him a polygraph test. They looked for inconsistencies in his timeline. For a short time, Rob was a primary suspect. Rumors in small towns move fast, and some people wondered if he had invented the truck and the chase to cover up some darker truth. But there were problems with that theory. First, Rob passed multiple polygraphs and cooperated fully. Second, witnesses began to come forward. 2 separate people reported seeing a truck like the one Rob described, and a man matching the bearded stranger's description near the payphones that night. Rob's story, as dramatic as it was, lined up with these independent accounts and with the physical evidence. Angela's abandoned car, the timing of the phone call, the distance involved. Eventually, investigators publicly cleared him. To this day, Clinton police and later cold case reviews have stated that they do not consider Rob Schaefer involved in Angela's disappearance. For Rob, that likely meant living with both the trauma of that night and the knowledge that some people would always quietly wonder. A search with no answers. In the days after the abduction, the response was huge for such a small community. More than 150 volunteers joined law enforcement teams to search in and around Clinton. They combed fields, wooded areas, farm outbuildings, and roadside ditches in Henry and surrounding counties. The Missouri State Highway Patrol checked hundreds of green pickup trucks looking for anything that matched the distinctive description. Two-tone green, older model Ford, with a mural, often described as water or a fish jumping out of water, covering the back window, possibly some damage to the left front fender. Nothing stuck. There were no confirmed sightings of Angela after that night. No blood at the payphone, no discarded items of clothing that could be tied to her. It was as if the truck had opened up, swallowed her, and then vanished. At this point, for many small towns, the story might have ended as a self-contained tragedy. A single abduction, a predator passing through, a wound that never healed. But investigators started to see Angela's case in a much larger, darker pattern. Serial killer, drug ring, Oregon. Something else? Even before Angela's abduction, police in west central Missouri were dealing with something horrifying: the murder of Trudy Darby and the disappearance of Cheryl Kenny. Trudy had called her son about a suspicious man in January 1991, then vanished from her convenience store. Her body was found days later in a river. She had been raped and shot twice. Cheryl locked up her own convenience store in Nevada, Missouri in February 1991 and disappeared without a trace. Her car was still in the parking lot, just like Angela's was left by the payphone. Angela's case, in April, was the third in the region in less than 3 months. The similarities were unsettling. Women alone at night, rural Missouri towns, sudden disappearances associated with a single location, a store, a phone booth. Few or no witnesses. The idea that one predator might be responsible for all 3 cases wasn't far-fetched. For a while, law enforcement talked openly about the possibilities of a serial killer operating in west-central Missouri. Some investigators and writers would later wonder whether men like Jesse Rush and Marvin Chaney, ultimately convicted in Trudy Darby's case, could also be tied to Cheryl or Angela. Others speculated about known serial killers like Kenneth McDuff, who was active in a similar time frame. But there was a problem. In Trudy's case, police developed hard evidence, witnesses, and eventually confessions that pointed to Rush and Chaney. In Angela's and Cheryl's cases, there was no comparable evidence connecting any known offender. By the mid-90s, Trudy's murder was solved. Cheryl and Angela's cases remained cold. For decades, those were the main narratives. A possible serial predator who might never be identified, or multiple offenders whose paths crossed only in the public imagination. Then a new theory emerged, one that didn't focus on a random woman hunter at all. The letter. On the 30th anniversary of Angela's abduction, in 2021, the Clinton Police Department shared a piece of information they'd held back since the early days of the case. A cut-and-paste threat letter that pointed to a completely different motive. The letter wasn't sent to Angela's family. It was sent to a man involved in a narcotics investigation, a confidential informant who had helped authorities in a drug case. The note was made from letters cut out of newspapers or magazines, ransom style. It was addressed to the informant not by name, but by the identification number the court had assigned him to help keep him anonymous. In paraphrase, the letter said something like, "Hello, no, number. We know who you are. People like you deserve what you get. We know where your foxy daughter is at. She will see us soon. Tell wife's name. She has our deepest sympathy in her further loss. Goodbye." It was not subtle. The letter correctly used the exact informant number assigned to this man. Correctly used the first name of his estranged wife. Specifically referenced his daughter, calling her Foxy, and threatening that she would see us soon. Most disturbingly, the letter was postmarked April 4th, 1991, the same date Angela Hammond was abducted from that phone booth in Clinton. On its own, that would be unsettling, but there's another detail. The informant's daughter was also named Angela. She was living in Clinton at that time, and from what's been reported, she was apparently similar in age and appearance to Angela Hammond. Put yourself in the mindset of someone in a criminal organization, say a drug ring, who wants revenge on an informant. You know the man's code number. You know he has a daughter named Angela. You know his estranged wife's first name. You know the city where the daughter lives. You want to send a message. We can get to your family. You write a letter, you drive to Clinton on April 4th. You look for a young woman named Angela. In a small town, how many Angelas in their late teens or early 20s, with similar build and hair can there be? Police now publicly say that they believe it is very possible that the people behind that letter went to Clinton, intending to kidnap the informant's daughter Angela, and instead grabbed Angela Hammond, a case of mistaken identity. The wrong Angela at the wrong payphone on the wrong night. Multiple suspects, multiple possibilities. In interviews about this theory, Clinton Police Captain Paul Abbott has said he believes it would be difficult for one person alone to pull off Angela's abduction the way it happened. Watching her, approaching her at the phones, grabbing her, getting her into a truck, and escaping a pursuing car all in a short window of time. That suggests more than one person may have been involved. One to drive, one to grab. Maybe more behind the scenes. People tied to a drug operation, people who knew the informant's identity and family details. This doesn't make the earlier theories about serial predators or Rush and Cheney impossible. It just adds another layer. Some investigators and researchers think the drug ring revenge theory is the strongest explanation so far. Others are skeptical, pointing out that if you know enough to write such a specific letter, you should have been able to find the right Angela. Still, the timing speaks for itself. A letter threatening a foxy daughter, postmarked on the very day a young woman named Angela is kidnapped in the same town where the informant's daughter lives. A driver bold enough to snatch a woman from a central location and flee while her fiancé is in pursuit. To this day, police say they cannot rule out the mistaken identity theory. They also haven't been able to fully prove it. At one point, after the letter became public, investigators got a mysterious anonymous call, someone who seemed to know more about it. That caller hung up and never phoned again. Whoever they were, they might still be alive. The human aftermath. While theories are debated online and in podcasts, the people closest to Angela have lived with the consequences. Her fiancé, Rob, had to carry the memory of hearing her abduction in real time and watching the truck carrying her disappear into the dark. Her mother, Marcia Cook, became an advocate and a constant, grief-stricken presence in the case. For decades, she hoped for any answer, whether that meant Angela being found alive somewhere, or at least recovering her remains. Marcia died in May 2021, shortly after the 30th anniversary of her daughter's disappearance, without ever learning what truly happened that night. Age-progressed images show what Angela might look like in her 40s or 50s. Somewhere out there, if she had survived, her child would now be in their 30s. But there has never been a confirmed trace of either. The Ouroboros. Let's go back to that image from the beginning. A lone payphone in the middle of a small Missouri town. Streetlights buzzing. A young woman leaning against the glass talking quietly to the man she plans to marry. She's tired. She's pregnant. She's planning a bath, maybe some sleep, another ordinary day tomorrow. And then a truck circles the block. We have 2 messages from that night. The first is what Rob heard through the line, right after Angela's scream. I didn't need to use the phone anyway. The second is what the informant saw in that cut-and-paste letter. We know where your foxy daughter is at. She will see us soon. Put together, they sound less like random cruelty and more like pieces of a plan. Someone needed to send a message. Someone wanted a family to suffer. Maybe Angela Hammond was the target all along. A vulnerable young woman in the wrong place at the wrong time, hunted by a stranger who had already attacked others. Or maybe, as police increasingly suspect, she was the wrong Angela, caught up in revenge for a drug case she knew nothing about, mistaken for another woman who shared her name and, tragically, her looks. We don't know which of those stories is true. All we know is that after 11:45 p.m. on April 4th, 1991, Angela's voice was never heard again. Her mother went to her grave without answers. Rob had to build a life in the shadow of a night that still defines him. Clinton remains a town where people remember the girl taken from the phone booth and the truck with the fish mural that no one could ever quite find. The official case is still open. There's still a file, still a phone on a detective's desk that could ring with the one tip they've been waiting for. Maybe the person who wrote that letter is still alive. Maybe someone who heard a confession years ago has been waiting for the right moment to come forward. And maybe, as you listen to this, someone in a quiet town is looking out at the road, hearing an engine in the distance, wondering if they're about to see the same kind of truck Angela saw 30-plus years later. If you know anything about the disappearance of Angela Hammond, authorities in Clinton, Missouri, still want to hear from you. For them, and for Angela's family, it isn't just a story, it's an unfinished phone call that's been ringing since 1991. And until someone answers it, this mystery isn't over. The Vanished Milepost. Good evening, Mr. Williams. My name is Tom. I'm 42. A few years ago, during summer, I took a road trip across the U.S. It was supposed to be a break from the stress I was carrying. My divorce had just finalized. My father had passed away from cancer, and I'd been on unpaid leave from work for months. I needed air, space. So I took my pickup and drove west from Illinois toward Utah with no solid plan. It was late July, hot as hell, and I found myself cutting through the back roads of Nevada after detouring from I-80. No cell signal, no traffic, just me, the sun-baked asphalt, and radio static. Around 7:30 p.m., I was somewhere outside Ely. I'd been driving for hours. The sun was dipping. I saw a wooden sign, Milepost 87, and a rusted marker for a scenic route that looped through some hills. The road looked old, but my gut told me it would make the drive more interesting. I took the turn. That was my first mistake. The road started nice enough. 2 lanes, cracked but drivable. Pines and brush on either side. After about 20 minutes, things got weird. The first thing I noticed was the temperature. It dropped sharply from 95 degrees Fahrenheit to something like 60, maybe lower. My windshield fogged slightly, even though the AC was off. Then the light dimmed, faster than it should have with the sun still above the ridge. I passed a deer on the shoulder. Dead, but it didn't look like it had been hit. No blood, no broken bones. Just lying there like it had been placed. 10 minutes later, another deer. Same thing. I slowed down, scanned the road. That's when I noticed the mile marker on the right. Milepost 87. Again. I thought I was seeing things, but no. Same broken pole, same leaning sign, same patch of road. I kept driving. More silence. No signs of life, no cars, no buildings. Then my radio, which had been hissing static for hours, crackled into a clear voice. A girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, said, "He's waiting." Just like that. No music, no other signal, just that sentence. And then silence again. I pulled over, turned off the engine. Sat in that heavy silence, heart pounding. I looked in the rearview mirror and realized something else. There were no tire marks behind me. No dust trail, no heat from the engine. It was like I hadn't moved at all. I got out of the truck. Bad idea. The air outside didn't feel like normal night air. It was heavy, wet, and it smelled like rust and wet soil. I walked a few feet back, thinking maybe I had imagined the mile marker. But there it was again, Milepost 87. Exactly the same. Only this time, there was something else. In the ditch near the marker, there was a pair of shoes. Children's shoes. Small, faded red sneakers. And beside them, a Polaroid photo. I picked it up. It was a picture of me, standing next to my truck. Only I was smiling. And someone or something was behind me. A tall, black silhouette with no features. Just standing there, hand on my shoulder. I dropped the photo and ran back to the truck. Engine wouldn't start. My phone was still dead. Every time I looked up, the forest seemed closer to the road. The trees felt like they were pressing in, blocking what little light remained. The sun had vanished, and it wasn't nightfall. It was something else. I sat behind the wheel, shaking, waiting for something, anything to change. And then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Right behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I stared ahead, refusing to move and to blink, to acknowledge whatever was there. My chest felt like it would collapse. Then the breathing stopped. A hand brushed my neck. And just like that, the engine roared to life. I didn't question it. I floored it and drove straight ahead. I didn't stop for signs, didn't check the GPS. I just drove. After what felt like an hour, I saw a diner up ahead. Real place, real cars, lights, people. I pulled in, shaking, covered in sweat. Asked the waitress where I was. "Milepost 87, she said. "You just passed it." I told her that was impossible, that I'd been stuck there for hours. She just looked confused. That night, I stayed in a motel next door. I never found that old road again. I've looked on maps, on satellite view, asked locals. Nothing. But I still have the photo. It reappeared in my glove box a week later. Only now, I'm not smiling in it. And the figure behind me, it's closer. Night shift. Good evening. My name is Carlos Sebastian Melgarejo. I'm a truck driver from a rural province in Argentina. Born in the chaos of the city, I always dreamed of living in the countryside. And that dream came true when I finished building my house, surrounded by cornfields and woods, where I moved in with my family. Despite the distance from the city, I kept working as a trucker. What I never imagined was that this quiet new environment would be the setting for one of the most disturbing and unexplainable experiences of my life. It was around 3 a.m. I was driving back to the city on the main highway with time to spare. I was thinking about a project my son Hector and I had, building an animal corral. We wanted to buy livestock and start breeding them for extra income. As I drove, the first strange thing I noticed was the heat. It wasn't a normal summer warmth. It felt like the air had turned into steam. The windshield fogged up instantly. I slowed down, but the truck started decelerating on its own. Then it shut down completely. I sat frozen for a moment. Then I heard a low humming sound. I wiped the windshield and saw it, a cow lying in the middle of the road. I thought it might be a trap. Maybe thieves were nearby waiting for me to get out. But the place was deserted. I grabbed my flashlight and my gun and stepped outside. The heat and the humming disappeared as soon as I touched the pavement. I cautiously approached the animal, planning to scare it off. But when I got closer, I saw it was already dead. Its belly was ripped open, completely hollow, with no organs, no blood. I stood stunned when I heard a strange shriek. I looked up, and on the roof of my truck, I saw something crouching. At first, I thought it was a child, but when I pointed the flashlight, it went dead. Then the thing stood up. It wasn't a child. It wasn't even human. It was short, muscular, with long arms nearly reaching the ground. It opened them slowly, like preparing to attack. And then, flash. A light so bright it turned night into day for a split second. I blacked out. When I opened my eyes, I was at home, sitting on my bed. My wife was beside me, asking if I'd had a nightmare. She said I got home on time, that Hector had picked me up like always. She even remembered our plan to find animals to buy. I didn't say anything. I was shaken but hoped it had all been a dream. But the next morning, when I saw Hector eating breakfast like nothing had happened, my hands started shaking. He confirmed everything. The route, the timing, the visit to the neighboring village. Everything matched, except I couldn't remember any of it. That night, my wife asked me, "So, what happened to the cow you found on the road? Good thing you moved it. It could have caused an accident." She remembered it. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Different road, same symptoms, unbearable heat, low humming, engine failing. This time, I locked the windows and held my gun tightly, waiting for it to come. But it appeared from where I least expected. The Black Pit. Good evening. My name is Ramon. I serve in the Mexican Army, Special Operations Division. I'd rather not say my full name or exact location for reasons that will become clear. This happened during an anti-cartel operation in the northeast of the country, in a remote mountain area. We had been deployed to intercept a heavily armed group that had taken over a large abandoned estate deep in the hills. They were reportedly involved in disappearances. Locals said people who got too close never came back. 10 of us were deployed, all armed, experienced. We moved in at night, under orders to clear the house and eliminate all resistance. The place was massive, old colonial style, once beautiful, now rotting. Ivy devoured its walls. Inside, the air was dense, humid, filled with the odor of mold and gun oil. The entry was clean. 2 guards taken out silently by our sniper. We stormed to the ground floor, found 4 armed men playing cards. We neutralized them in under 15 seconds. One of them, before dying, shouted "No, not the well," and looked at the back window. That made no sense at the time. Minutes later, we heard a vehicle start. Outside, a truck tried to escape through a forest path. Our men shot out the tires. A firefight ensued. 2 of ours were hit, one fatally. When the shooting stopped, we'd secured the house. The commanding officer ordered a sweep, room by room, attic, cellar. Then we found the back garden. It was off, a courtyard behind the mansion, surrounded by statues of angels, broken, worn by time. In the center, a stone well, very old. Iron lid, rusted shut. That's when we heard it, a voice, faint, from below. "Help!" One of ours, Corporal Morales, called it out. "There's someone down there." We gathered around. The lid wouldn't move, so we used a crowbar. When we opened it, cold air poured out, unnatural cold, like from a freezer. Morales leaned over. "There's someone." Then silence. He froze, just stood there, looking down. Then he dropped his rifle, jumped in. No hesitation, just jumped. We were stunned. One of us screamed his name, but it was too late. Another soldier, Mendoza, shouted, "He's gone." I grabbed the flashlight, pointed it into the hole. The beam went maybe 5 meters. Then blackness, endless. We tried to radio base. Static. Our comms were dead. We argued. Some said we should leave immediately. Others wanted to secure Morales' body. Then the screaming began. First, a faint cry from inside the well, then louder. Not Morales, something else. Dozens of voices, screeching, wailing. We backed away. Sergeant Torres ordered us to retreat to the trucks. That's when the lights went out. All of them. Flashlights, scopes, night vision, pitch black, then footsteps. Behind us, in front of us, all around, but no one visible. I don't know how we got out. I remember running. Hearing Mendoza's voice scream once, then silence. Only 4 of us made it back to the vehicles. We drove all night, didn't stop until sunrise. No one spoke. Back at the base, they told us to write it up as a cartel operation. Do not mention the well, they said. Morales died in crossfire. Mendoza, too. They even had fake death reports prepared. But here's the worst part. 3 nights later, I woke up in my bunk. There was dirt on the floor, muddy footprints, and on my bed a combat knife. Morales knife. With a note written in charcoal. It's not over. I've asked for transfer, denied. They say I'm unstable. Maybe they're right. I barely sleep now. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the voices. And sometimes I see the well. Thanks for being with us tonight. We continue with the next story. Rest area at mile 214. Hello, Mr. Williams. My name is Daniel. I live in Dallas, Texas, and I want to share with you something that happened to me last summer during a road trip vacation in the United States. I am not a trucker. I work in construction from Monday to Saturday, long hours under the sun, and I almost never leave the city. That trip was supposed to be a break from everything. I had saved for months to rent a car and drive alone from Dallas to the Grand Canyon. I say alone because that was part of my problem. The trip was planned for 2 people. My younger brother was supposed to come with me. But he died 3 months before. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. An armed robbery at a small store in Oak Cliff. He just wanted to buy some soda. 1 shot, and that was all. I know it was not my fault, but I still feel guilty. That night he asked me if I wanted to go with him. I told him no, that I was tired, that I wanted to sleep. Sometimes I think that maybe if I had gone, things would have been different. Maybe not. I will never know. After the funeral, I fell into a kind of hole. I went to work, I came back, I slept a little, and I tried to keep my mind empty. The trip was already paid and everyone told me to cancel it. But I did not. I said to myself that I would do the same route that we had planned. Same stops, same photos. Maybe that way I would feel him with me. I left Dallas before sunrise, driving west. Hours and hours of straight road. Gas stations that all looked the same. Fast food, black coffee. By the second day, I reached northern Arizona. My idea was to sleep in a cheap motel near Flagstaff and go to the Grand Canyon early the next morning. But that night I made a mistake. I decided to keep driving, even though I was very tired. It was close to 10 p.m. The highway was I-40, heading west. The last town behind me had disappeared in the mirrors. Out there was only desert, black hills against the sky and long lines of trucks, far ahead, like small red dots floating in the darkness. The air inside the car smelled of cold fries and old coffee. I had the radio on a low volume, some rock station that kept fading in and out. The green light of the dashboard was the only thing that made me feel less alone. I kept thinking about my brother, the 2 of us laughing, saying stupid things in Spanish and English mixed together, planning which side of the canyon would look better on camera. Then the real picture came back. The hospital, my mother's face, the way my father stared at the floor. The more I tried not to think about it, the more it came back. I remember looking at a green sign on the side of the road. Rest area, 15 miles. I told myself, okay, I will stop there, stretch my legs, throw away the trash, wash my face, and then I will finish the last hour to Flagstaff. The air outside looked dry and clean. The sky had no moon, only some stars. The lines on the asphalt shone under my headlights, and the sound of the tires against the road was constant, like white noise. After some minutes, I saw another sign. Rest area 15 miles. I thought I had read it wrong the first time. Maybe the first one said 30. I did not pay attention. I touched my phone to see if the GPS was still working. There were only 2 bars of signal, but the map showed the same. A rest area called Sagebrush View a little ahead. I kept driving. 10 minutes later, another sign. Same green color, same words, same number. Rest area, 15 miles. This time, I know I was not wrong. I felt a knot in my stomach. I checked the clock. According to my speed, I should have already reached the place or at least be closer. I lowered the radio and listened. The engine sounded normal. The road seemed normal. What did not feel normal was the air. It started to get cold inside the car. I had the AC on low, but this was different. It was like someone opened a door inside the vehicle and let in a colder air from another place. The hair on my arms stood up. I smelled something that did not belong there. Wet dirt, like after heavy rain, mixed with something metallic, like old coins or blood on keys. I looked at the windshield. The glass was clean, but for a few seconds a thin layer of fog appeared on the inside, as if I'd been breathing hard for hours. It faded fast, but it left a mark in my mind. I checked the temperature outside on the dashboard, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Not cold at all. I took a breath and told myself that it was only fatigue, that grief plus caffeine and hours of driving played tricks on the brain. Then I saw the sign again. Rest area, 15 miles, the same number. The same small scratch in the corner of the sign. The same crooked post. I felt my mouth go dry. Finally, after what felt like a long time, the GPS spoke in that flat voice. Rest area ahead. Exit right. I saw it then, a blue sign with a white symbol of a bench and a tree and an arrow pointing to the right. The ramp to the rest area opened in front of me. It was empty. No trucks, no cars. Only yellow lamps and a small building of concrete and bricks. I took the exit. The noise reduced at once, like when you close a door. The highway stayed a little higher to my left. I could see one or two trucks passing like slow comets, and then only darkness again. The parking area had several spaces for cars and a section for trucks farther back. All of them were empty. I parked close to the building, turned off the engine. The silence hit me hard. No radio, no tires on asphalt, no people. Just the wind, very light, moving the dry grass. The cold became worse inside the car. It was strange because the AC was off. I rubbed my hands and watched. The windshield fogged again, this time thicker, like someone breathed on it from the outside. I leaned closer. That was when I saw the first sign that something was wrong. In the thin fog, for a second, there was the shape of a small hand, like the print a child leaves on glass. 5 fingers, a small palm. It appeared, and then the fog melted, and the glass was clear again. I pulled back so fast that my seat creaked. My heart was beating hard in my chest. There were no kids there, I was sure. There were no cars, no families, nobody. I told myself I was hallucinating. Maybe my mind wanted to see my brother's hand. When we were kids, he used to press his fingers against the car window and draw faces on the fog. The memory made my eyes sting. I decided to get out. I needed air. When I opened the door, a wave of cold hit my face, much colder than the temperature should be in the desert at that time. It smelled like wet dirt again, even though the ground was dry and cracked. The lamps above gave a yellow light that buzzed from time to time. The small building had bathrooms and some vending machines. On the wall, there was a map of Arizona, covered with scratches and graffiti. Everything looked normal. Still, there was that feeling, like I was not alone. I walked to the bathroom. The echo of my steps seemed too loud. Inside, one of the sinks was dripping. No other noise. No toilets flushing, no people talking, no hand dryers. Just the drip. Slow and constant. I washed my face with cold water. When I raised my head, I almost screamed. In the mirror, behind me, in the far corner near the door, there was a shape, very small, like a child standing still, facing the wall. My heart stopped for a second. I turned fast, ready to say, "Hey," or "Are you okay?" But there was no one there. Only the open door and a paper towel on the floor. I looked back at the mirror. Empty. The dripping sink kept making that same sound. I left the bathroom and decided that I had rested enough. I would go back to the car and drive to the motel, no more stops. My legs felt heavy, as if I had walked for hours. The moment I stepped out, I heard something new. Not the wind, not the highway. It was a sound like someone crying. Very low, a child trying not to be heard. The hair on my neck rose. The sound came from the far end of the parking lot, near the truck spaces. There, under one broken lamp, was a minivan. I was sure it had not been there when I arrived. It was dark red or maybe brown. The color was hard to see under the light. The hazard lights were not on, but the vehicle was slightly crooked, like it had stopped in a hurry. The crying sound came from there. I stood still for a moment. I thought about just going to my car and leaving, but I imagined a kid alone inside that van, maybe injured, maybe with parents unconscious in the front seats. I could not ignore it. My brother would not have ignored it. So I started walking towards the minivan. With each step, the air felt heavier, like breathing through a wet cloth. The smell of dirt grew stronger, and under it there was another faint smell, something like fish left too long in a closed place. The crying continued, always at the same low volume. Not louder as I got closer, not softer. The broken lamp above the minivan flickered. On, off. Each time it turned off, the parking lot fell into a thick shadow. Each time it turned on, I saw the vehicle a little clearer. All its windows were dark. I stopped 2 or 3 meters away. "Hey," I said, my voice small in that open space. "Is someone there? Do you need help?" No answer. The crying did not change. I walked to the driver's side. The front window was up. I could not see much inside, only shapes. The driver's seat seemed empty. Then, through the glass, I saw something move in the second row. A small figure in a child's seat. It was still. The crying seemed to come from that spot, but the figure did not shake, did not bow its head, did not move. "Hey, kid," I tried again. "Are you okay?" Nothing. My hand went to the door handle. I hesitated. What if this was a trap? What if someone came from behind and hit me? I looked around. The parking lot was empty. The highway above continued distant and straight. A truck passed by. The sound came down like a wave and then faded. I turned back to the minivan. The lamp above turned off. I was in the dark for just 1 second. When it turned on again, the child's seat was empty. The crying stopped. I felt something behind me, very close, like when a person stands too near your back in a line. A pressure in the air, a shadow that you do not see but feel. The smell of wet dirt and metal became so strong that I almost gagged. I did not turn around. I could not. Every muscle in my body locked. My eyes filled with tears. I thought of my brother standing too close behind me, playing, trying to scare me like when we were kids. For a moment, I almost said his name. Then I heard another sound. Not crying. Not a voice. It was air passing through a small throat, like someone trying to start a sob but never finishing it. Right next to my ear. That broke something inside me. I ran. I ran without looking back, from the minivan to my rental car. The cold air cut my lungs. My legs felt heavy like sandbags, but somehow I reached the car, opened the door, and almost threw myself inside. I locked the doors. My hands shook so much that I could hardly put the key in the ignition. Right when I turned it, the car filled with noise. The radio, which I'd left at low volume, turned on by itself at maximum. White static, like 1,000 voices whispering at the same time. The air got even colder. My breath came out visible. On the inside of the windshield, in front of my face, there were now not one, but several small handprints, one next to another. Some higher, some lower, like a group of children pressing their hands against the glass, asking to come in, or to get out. The engine coughed, then started. Headlights on. I put the car in reverse, almost without seeing, tears blurring my vision. I turned, stepped on the gas, moved back, then forward, following the exit signs like in a dream. As I took the ramp back to the highway, the static in the radio cut at once. The cold went away so fast that it left a dull pain in my chest. The smell of dirt and metal disappeared. I looked in the rearview mirror. The rest area was dark. There was no minivan, only the building and the empty parking lot. I reached Flagstaff close to midnight. My hands hurt from holding the steering wheel so hard. When I parked in front of the motel room, I stayed in the car for a long time, trying to calm down. Inside, the room smelled of cheap cleaner and old carpet. I took a shower and tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those small hands on the glass and felt that presence behind me. Near dawn, I gave up and turned on the TV. Local news came up. Traffic reports, sports, weather. I was not paying much attention until I heard something that made my blood run cold. Authorities continue to investigate last year's tragic accident at the Sagebrush View Rest Area at mile marker 214, where a family of 6 died after their minivan caught fire. The rest area was closed for months and reopened recently after repairs. My hand went to the remote. I turned up the volume. The reporter stood in front of the same building I had seen hours before. On the screen, they showed an old picture, a red minivan, almost destroyed, and some black bags on the ground that I tried not to identify. I muted the TV. There was a mirror on the wall next to the bed. On the small table under it, my car keys rested next to my phone. I stared at them for a moment and noticed something that had not been there before. Dry mud. Very small footprints on the metal key, like someone with tiny fingers had held it in their hand for a long time. I did not go to the Grand Canyon that day. I checked out of the motel and drove back to Dallas in daylight, stopping only where there were many people. Since then, I avoid driving alone at night on long highways. If I have no choice, I do not stop at rest areas. I prefer to sleep in the car on the shoulder of a gas station, under cameras and lights. Sometimes, though, when I drive around the city at night, especially near hospitals or schools, the radio fills with static for 1 or 2 seconds. The air inside the car gets cold. In the mirror, I think I see someone small sitting in the back seat, just for a blink. I tell myself it is only my mind, mixed with grief and lack of sleep. But deep down, I know that on that road in Arizona, I walked into a place where time does not work like here. A place that repeats a tragedy over and over, looking for someone to see it or to share it. Maybe my brother did that trip after all, just not in the way I wanted. Thanks for being with us tonight. We continue with the next story, Desert Exit. Hello, Mr. Williams. You can call me Daniel. I was born in El Paso, but right now I live in Houston and work in construction. I listen to your podcast at night while I drive between jobs, and I decided to send this story because what happened to me was not while I was working, but during the first real vacation I tried to take with my family. I need to start with something personal because without that part, what happened on that highway doesn't make sense to me. Last year, in July, my marriage was hanging by a thread. I had been working almost every day, double shifts, overtime whenever the boss called. Rent had gone up, the car payment was late. My mother in El Paso had started dialysis, and I was sending her money every month. My wife, Elena, was alone with our daughter, Sophia, almost all the time. One night, she told me, without raising her voice, that she couldn't keep living with a man who only came home to shower and sleep. She said a phrase I still hear in my head: "Bills are paid, but Sophie is growing up without a dad." I promised I would change. I said we would take a trip together, just the three of us, before school started again. No phones, no work, just a road trip like in the movies. Elena didn't believe me at first, but I sold some tools, cleared 2 weeks on the schedule, and booked cheap motels along the way. The plan was simple: drive from Houston to Arizona, visit the Grand Canyon, maybe stop in New Mexico so Sophia could see real desert, not just city. The first days were good. Too good, tal vez. We ate fast food, took pictures at silly roadside attractions, slept in motels with buzzing neon signs and broken ice machines. Sophia was happy, sticking her hand out the window, singing along to songs on the radio. For a while, I felt like I was fixing everything I had broken. The night this happened, we were in West Texas, heading toward El Paso by I-10. Endless straight line, black on both sides, only the faint glow of distant pump jacks in the fields. It was a Sunday, middle of the long weekend of the 4th of July. Fireworks were already forbidden in that area because of fire danger, so the sky was clean and empty. Around midnight, Sophia started coughing in the back seat. She has asthma. That's another thing I always feel guilty about, because some doctors say construction dust at home makes it worse. We had her inhaler, but that night she couldn't stop coughing. First a little, then more. That dry sound that hits your chest when you're a parent. Elena looked at me with that panic that doesn't explode, just sits behind the eyes. Her inhaler is almost empty, she said. We should stop somewhere. I checked the GPS. The next town with a hospital was still far. There was a symbol for a rest area and services at exit 214, about 15 miles ahead. 15 minutes, DJ. We'll stop there. Maybe there's a vending machine with water, a payphone for emergencies. Worst case, we let her breathe calm air outside a little. Sophia was wheezing now. I turned off the music to hear her better and pushed the rental SUV a little faster. The asphalt hummed under the tires. The air vents blew that artificial cold air that smells like plastic and coffee. Outside, the desert was completely dark. No houses, no gas stations, no lights in the distance. Just the white lines of the highway vanishing under the front bumper, one after another, like a slow countdown. When I saw the green sign that said Exit 214 Rest Area 1 mile, I felt relief like never before. But from Ahi, everything started to feel wrong. Not in a loud way, in a quiet way that gets inside your skin. Primero, the temperature. I had the AC set to low, but suddenly the air inside the cabin felt heavy, warm, almost sticky, as if somebody had turned on a heater. I checked the controls. The light was still on cold. I lowered it anyway. No change. A thin film of sweat appeared on my hands between my fingers, making the steering wheel feel slick. Then the sound. I realized the noise from the road had faded. I still saw the speedometer at 65, but the vibration under the feet, that constant low roar you feel when you drive, dropped until it felt like we were floating. "Do you hear that?" murmured Elena. "Hear what?" I asked. But I already knew Dot. It was the absence of everything. No wind dot, no engine strain dot. Just a low hum, almost electrical, coming from nowhere. I took the exit dot. The ramp curved gently to the right. There was a blue sign. Rest area 1/2 mile. Under it, someone had stuck a faded sticker of a smiling family in a minivan. It looked old, sun-bleached. The further we went down the ramp, the warmer the air became. I could see the shimmer of heat in the beams of the headlights, like at noon on summer asphalt, but it was past midnight. Sofía, en la parte de atrás, seguía tosiendo, pero más despacio. Eso me calmó un poco. The rest area appeared ahead. A wide concrete lot, some picnic tables under metal shelters, a small brick building with restrooms and vending machines. 2 tall light poles stood over the parking lot. Only one was on. The light that worked was too white, too strong. It made the empty spaces look even more empty. The other pole was dead, just a dark stick. There were 3 vehicles parked. A white SUV, nose in, next to the building. A big pickup truck, lifted, with mud on the sides, dot, and an old beige minivan, parked crooked across 2 spaces, with one back door slightly open. No one moved, dot. No doors shutting, dot. No voices, dot. No insects hitting the light. I pulled in a few spaces away from the minivan. I could see a child's car seat inside it, turned to the side, the straps hanging like limp arms. There were bright-colored snack wrappers on the ground near its open door. I told myself a family was inside the building using the bathroom. Normal. People stop at rest areas at night all the time, but my neck muscles were tight. "Stay here with Sophie," I told Elena. "I'll check if there's a vending machine or someone who knows a clinic nearby." She nodded, and that's when I noticed something else, the SUV's engine noise, or rather, the lack of it. Its lights were off, windows dark, but it had that look of a car that arrived not long ago. Fresh dust on the tires, clean windshield. Still, no ticking metal, no cooling sound, nothing. I stepped out. The heat hit me like a wall. Not normal Texas heat. This was like being inside a closed garage at noon with the engine running. The air smelled faintly of hot rubber and something else under it, like wet dog and old fruit. The silence was wrong. Not even remote rest stops at night have some sound. Crickets, distant trucks, wind. Here, no breeze moved the little trash pieces on the ground. The only thing I heard was that low hum I had noticed on the highway. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I locked the SUV with the remote. When it beeped, the sound echoed too clear, like we were inside a big empty hall. The building's automatic door didn't open when I approached. It was one of those sliding glass doors. I stood right in front of it. Nothing. I waved my hand. Nothing. Through the glass, I could see a fluorescent tube flickering, making the interior look greenish. A drink machine stood against the wall. Its little screen was dark. There was a metal handle on the door frame like an emergency option. I pulled it. The door moved a few inches with a dry screech, then stopped. That's when, behind me, something closed. A soft click dot, like a car door pushed shut without force. I turned fast dot. Our SUV was the same, locked, lights off. The pickup too. The only change, the minivan's back door, the one that had been half open, was now shut. I stared at it dot. The low hum grew a bit stronger, like a refrigerator when the compressor kicks in. The white light from the pole above us drew long dark shapes under the cars. They didn't look like usual shadows. They seemed too dense, edges too sharp, like black paper cutouts glued to the ground. I felt an urge to call out, "Hello? Anybody there? You okay?" But the words stayed stuck in my throat. There was something in that place that told me not to raise my voice. Instead, I walked toward the minivan. The air around it felt warmer, like it had absorbed all the heat of the day and was now holding it. The closer I got, the more that other smell hit me. Not rotten, not exactly. More like when you leave meat out too long and then freeze it. A cold sweetness hidden underneath heat. The windows were dark, still comma. As I came up beside the sliding door, I had the impression that somebody was on the other side of the glass, inches from my face, watching me. The hairs on my arms stood up. My fingers started to tingle. I raised my hand to knock. Before my knuckles touched the glass, the minivan rocked once. Just a small shift on its suspension, like something heavy inside had moved, throwing weight to one side. The movement was too slow for a person climbing in or out. It was more like something adjusting itself. Right then, Sophia coughed hard behind me. Her little body bent in two inside of our SUV. The sound snapped me back. I pulled away from the minivan and almost ran back to the driver's door. As soon as I opened it, the first breath of air from inside felt cool again. Normal. The low hum fell a bit, like someone turning down a dimmer. "Any people inside?" asked Elena, voice tense. "I didn't see anyone," I said. "Door's stuck. Machines are off. I'll drive to the next town. We'll find an ER." I started the engine. The GPS screen lit up, but for a second it flickered, and instead of the map I saw a black screen with a single white line, like a heartbeat monitor flatline. Then it came back to normal. I put the SUV in reverse. Before I could move, something tapped the back window. 3 light knocks. Too high for a kid, too soft for gravel. All 3 of us froze. I watched the rearview mirror. At first, I saw nothing. Just the light pole, a slice of the brick building, the empty space where the minivan had been. The minivan wasn't there anymore. I hadn't heard an engine, hadn't heard tires on gravel. The parking lot was empty except for the pickup and us. But I know what I saw when we arrived. There's no way I invented a whole vehicle. "Elena, did you see the—" "I know," she said. Her hand reached back, checking Sophia's leg. Our daughter's coughing had almost stopped. Her chest rose and fell, deeper now, like after a good cry. The knocks came again. This time, not from the back, but from the rear passenger door, right next to Sophia. 3 slow raps, in a rhythm too calm for the fear I felt. I turned sideways, reaching my arm behind the seat. My fingers brushed her jeans. She jerked, then grabbed my hand hard. "Papa," she whispered. "There's a lady outside." Elena's eyes went wide. "Don't look," I said. But it was too late. Sophia was already staring past my shoulder, toward the glass. I forced myself to glance. Through the tinted window I could see a shape. Not clear, not detailed. Just a pale oval where a face should be, and 2 darker spots where the eyes were. No nose, no mouth. The head was too low for an adult, too high for a little child. The body behind it seemed bent, as if whoever was there couldn't stand straight. I couldn't see arms, but I knew they were raised, because when the knocks came a 3rd time, the sound was closer, almost inside my ear. Every part of me screamed to drive, instead, I did something I still don't understand. I lowered my head and whispered more to myself than to anyone else. "We can't help you. I'm sorry. We can't help you." The presence outside did not answer. I never heard a voice. There was only that electric hum, louder now, pressing against the glass. Then something changed in the air. The heat pushed in from all sides, compressing the space inside the SUV. The smell of old fruit and wet dog filled my nose. My ears popped like in a plane. For a second, it felt like we were deep underwater. Sophia inhaled with a sharp whistling sound. Then the pressure broke. Cool air rushed from the vents. The hum stopped. Crickets started chirping. Yes, crickets, loud all around. A big rig roared by on the interstate, its engine echoing over the lot. The shape at the window was gone. I didn't think. I slammed the gear into drive and shot it toward the exit. The tires squealed. Elena grabbed the handle above the door. Behind us, I heard something scrape lightly along the rear of the SUV like fingers on metal, but I didn't look back. We merged onto I-10 again. The digital clock on the dash said 12:07 a.m. The strange thing is this. When we had taken the exit, it had been 11:58. We had spent more time there, I know it. Between the walk, the knocking, the suffocating air, it had to be more than 9 minutes. But the clock insisted. 12:07. Sophia fell asleep 5 minutes later. Her breathing was normal, without wheeze. Elena stayed quiet for at least half an hour, staring out at the dark desert. Finally, she spoke. "Did you see her feet?" she asked. I swallowed, no. "I did," she said. Through the crack at the bottom of the window, there weren't any shoes. "That's not so strange." "There weren't any toes either," she said. "Just flat." We didn't talk any more about it that night. We reached El Paso around 3 in the morning. I drove straight to the ER anyway, just in case. The doctor listened to Sophia, checked her oxygen level, and told us her lungs sounded clear. He said sometimes kids respond to change of environment. Maybe the dry desert air helped her. I nodded, but my hands didn't stop shaking. The next afternoon, when the sun was high and we felt brave under blue sky, I tried to prove to myself that stress had played tricks on me. I searched on my phone for Rest Area Exit 214 I-10 West Texas. The map showed a rest stop in that area, but when I zoomed in, a little note appeared under it. Closed since 2011. There were some comments from Travelers. They said the place had been shut down after an incident. A family in a minivan found abandoned at night. Doors open. Child seat torn loose, no bodies, no answers. I stopped reading. I know what you're thinking, Mr. Williams. Maybe our GPS sent us to the old exit by mistake. Maybe we stopped at a place nobody uses now, and my brain filled the silence with fears. Maybe the minivan was never there. Maybe I saw the woman's shape in my own reflection on the glass. I repeat those maybes to myself when I need to sleep, that sometimes they work. But some mornings, when I go to the car to leave for work, I see faint marks on the rear door of our SUV. Long, thin streaks higher than Sophia can reach. They look like scratches, but not from a key or a branch. More like something soft but heavy was dragged there over and over again. The detail that never leaves me is simpler than all that. When I think back to that rest area, that empty parking lot under the white light, I can still hear the 3 knocks on the glass right next to my daughter's head. They sounded patient. Not angry. Like someone who has all the time in the world, waiting on that exit for any car that decides to stop and rest. Since that trip, I still drive for work, but I don't take my family on the highway at night anymore. If Sophia coughs, we go to a clinic in the city. I don't leave home for long weekends on the road. Elena thinks I changed for the better. She doesn't know that every time we pass a blue rest area sign, Even at noon, I feel that heavy heat in my chest again, and my foot presses the gas a little more. We don't stop, Dot. We just keep going. Thanks for being with us tonight. We continue with the next story. Detour through nowhere. Good night, Senor Williams. My name is Luis. I am from Monterey, and I drive buses for a living. I want to share with you what happened to me during what was supposed to be my first real vacation in the United States. I know most of your listeners are truckers and taxi drivers, but this time I was not working. I was just another tourist on the road. Maybe eso fue lo que más me dolió después. Saber que ni de vacaciones pude escapar de la carretera. For years, I promised my wife and my son that we would go to Disney in Florida. Every time I got a bonus, every time I did extra shifts, I said the same line. Next year we go, I swear. But the money always went somewhere else. To fix the roof, to pay debts, to help my brother with his medical bills. My boy grew up escuchando lo mismo. When he turned 12, he stopped asking. That hurt more than any shout or complaint. He just said, "Está bien, Papa. I know you're tired," and went back to his phone. That winter, my company gave me one unpaid week, no trips to cover. My wife said we could at least cross to Texas so the three of us could be together in some cheap motel, visit a mall, walk in a park, anything. Instead, I decided to go alone. I told them I wanted to explore routes and see if I could move to a trucking job in the States. That part was true. But deep down, I wanted some days without pressure. Without hearing that, I never kept my promises. So I used our small savings, bought a low-cost flight to Dallas, rented a gray SUV there, and planned a road trip through Texas and New Mexico. Solo una semana, I told my wife. When I come back, we plan something for the three of us. She just nodded. My son no longer raised his eyes from the screen. The first days went fine. Dallas, then Abilene, then Lubbock. Long, straight highways, perfect pavement, big gas stations with coffee that tasted like nothing. Everything felt clean, organized, almost too quiet. I am used to the chaos of Mexican roads, where always there is some noise, some danger. In those open spaces of West Texas, the silence felt heavier. On the fourth day, I drove to Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. I walked all day under the ground, among rocks and tourists with cameras. When I came out, the sky was orange and the parking lot almost empty. I checked my phone. No missed calls from home. Just one text from my wife. "Todo bien?" I replied, "Todo bien," took a picture of the sunset and sent it. My plan was to sleep in a cheap motel near I-40 on the way to Albuquerque. According to the GPS, it was about 3 hours from there. If I left at 7, I would arrive close to 10 in the night. Tarde, but not too late. So I started to drive north on Highway 285. Then I took small roads between oil fields and open land. The sun went down fast. In less than an hour, the sky turned black. The only light came from my own headlights and some red dots far away, maybe other cars, maybe towers. The SUV smelled of dust and the plastic from the rental company. The air conditioner blew cold on my face, but my hands were sweaty on the steering wheel. The radio played some country song I did not know. Then the signals started to fall. Static, voices cut in and out. I pressed the buttons. All stations sounded the same, noise and short bursts of English that I did not catch. I told myself it was normal. Rural area, few antennas. Still, a small knot formed in my chest. I am used to night driving, but not in a foreign country, alone, with signs and miles and towns whose names I could not even pronounce. Somewhere, after a small town called Artesia, the GPS voice said, "Recalculating route," and then froze. The map stayed fixed with the blue arrow on a straight line. I tapped the screen. Nothing. No network connection. I had downloaded the map so the route should stay, but the device seemed stuck. My phone had 1 bar of signal, then none. On the side of the highway, a green sign appeared under my headlights. Scenic Overlook Rest Area. 10 miles under that, in orange plastic, another piece. Bridge work ahead. Expect delays. I thought about stopping there, checking my phone and the map, but a second sign came later. Old 285 local access, 2 miles with a small arrow to the right. Under that, avoid bridge, use detour. I did not know if my motel was before or after that bridge. The GPS showed nothing new. I argued with myself for the next mile. In the end, I took the detour. A right turn onto a more narrow road, older asphalt, no center divider. No lights, only the white line on the edge, a bit faded, and low metal posts every 100 meters. I told myself it was the smart move. If the bridge ahead was closed, I would lose time. Better follow the signs that the same state had put there. Better trust the system. The road began to rise and fall. Gentle hills that made the headlights cut into the dark like a knife. Far off, to my left, I saw small red flashes, as if there were another highway in the distance. To my right, nothing. Just black land. I lowered the window a bit to wake myself up. A dry wind entered, with smell of dust and something else, like old water. I checked the clock on the dashboard. Past 11, I had driven more hours than I planned. Then came the first detail that did not fit. On the right side, just where the beam of the headlights faded, I saw a group of roadside crosses. 3 or 4 wooden crosses nailed into the ground, with flowers made of plastic and strips of fabric that moved in the wind. I know those crosses. We see them in Mexico all the time, where someone died in a crash. These looked old, the paint peeled, the flowers without color. I passed them, and in the rearview mirror I saw something hanging from one of the crosses, maybe a small shoe, a child's flip-flop. I felt a weight in my chest and pressed a bit more on the gas. 5 minutes later, the temperature in the cabin changed. The air that came from the vents turned warm, then hot, as if the heater had turned itself on. I reached for the controls. The panel was dead. No lights, no numbers. I twisted the knobs, nothing changed. The heat grew thick, heavy, like breath. At the same time, the windshield began to fog from inside. First, a light blur in the corners, then a gray film that ate the view. I turned on the defroster. No response. The same dead panel. I slowed down. My heart pounded. I lowered the window, hoping the outside air would clear the glass. A rush of cold air entered, much colder than it should be for that desert night. The fog on the glass formed little rivers. For a second, I saw shapes there, as if fingers had slid down from the top. A soft sound broke the silence. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I understood. Someone was crying in the back seat. It was not loud. It was a low, broken sob, like a child that has cried for a long time and no longer has strength. The sound came from behind my right shoulder, where the second row of seats began. I did not turn. My hands tightened on the wheel. My eyes stayed on the small, clear patch in the middle of the windshield, the only place where I could see the thin white line of the road. "Hello?" I said in English with my dry voice. "Is someone there?" No answer. The sobs went on, cutting in and out like the radio before. Not from outside, from inside the SUV. The smell changed then. The dust and plastic smell went away. In its place came the odor of wet clothes, of hair that dried under the sun after swimming, mixed with cheap sunscreen and something sour, like juice spilled long ago, A family car smell, a vacation smell. I had a son. I knew that smell. The power locks snapped down by themselves. All doors. 4 sharp clicks. I jumped in my seat. My foot shook on the gas pedal. I eased off, and the SUV started to slow. The engine made a low, strange noise, as if it resisted. "Please," I said, but I did not know to whom I was speaking. The sobbing rose a little, then stopped. The silence that came after was worse. The engine died. No lights on the panel, no hum. Just the rolling of the tires until they came to a full stop on the asphalt. The night pressed against all the windows. For a long moment I could not move. My breath came fast, loud in my ears. I felt the weight of a gaze on the back of my neck, like when a passenger stands behind you in the bus and you know he is watching. Slow, with hands that shook, I reached up and pulled the small lever of the interior light. Nothing. The cabin stayed dark, with just a bit of bluish glow from the outside, maybe the moon behind clouds. In that faint light, I could see the outline of the headrests and the empty passenger seat next to me. "Who is there?" I whispered. "Do you need help?" The answer was a soft thump behind me, like a small fist against the seat back. Then another, not angry, more like someone who wants to be noticed. I turned. On the rear window, on the right side, there was a handprint. Small, the size of a child's hand. The glass around it was fogged, but the place where the fingers had touched was clear, as if pressed from inside with force. My throat closed. No one had been there. I had checked the car at the rental office. I was alone from Dallas to there. There was no way. I grabbed my phone as if it were a weapon and turned on the flashlight. The beam shook in my hand. I pointed it to the back seat. No one. Just the dark fabric of the seats, a forgotten brochure from the caverns on the floor, my small backpack. The handprint on the glass started to fade before my eyes. The smell of wet cloth grew stronger. For a second, I felt the weight of something in the seat behind the passenger side, as if a body shifted its position there. Springs and foam made a tiny sound. My eyes went to the windshield again. The fog had cleared a bit in the center, enough to see what lay ahead. The road ended. No sign, no cones, no flashing lights. 10 meters in front of the SUV, the asphalt was broken, like a bitten cookie. The metal railing hung twisted over a dry creek bed that now was not so dry. Under the pale light, there was moving water. Brown, thick, fast. It crashed against rocks and the remains of what had been the other side of the road. If the engine had not died, if I had driven just a few seconds more, I would have gone straight into that gap. In that exact moment, the radio turned on by itself. A sharp tone, then a fast voice in English. Flash flood warning in effect for Eddy and Chavez counties. Do not attempt to cross flooded roadways. Turn around, don't drown. The signal fell again and the radio went silent. My hands were numb. I hit the hazard lights. They did not work. I tried to start the engine, no response. Dead. I sat there in the dark, listening to the water below. At times, between the roar, I thought I heard something else. Short sounds that rose and vanished. A baby crying, a woman shouting. It could have been the wind or my own head. My eyes moved to the right. On the other side of the broken guardrail, near the start of the gap, there were more roadside crosses. 5 this time. 2 small, 3 larger. At the foot of one of the small ones, someone had left a laminated photo. I opened the door and stepped out, because I felt that if I stayed inside the SUV, I would suffocate. The night air was cold and smelled of mud. The sound of the flood filled everything. I walked to the edge, careful not to get too close to the brake. The beam of my phone light shook over the gravel. I pointed it to the crosses. Dust, rust, plastic flowers, some faded balloons. The photo was barely held by a stone. I picked it up. It showed a family of 4 in front of a castle that I had seen thousands of times in ads. The Disney castle. The father wore a cap and sunglasses. The mother had a tired smile. The 2 kids, a boy and a girl, held stuffed animals in their arms. All tan, all happy. On the back, in Spanish, someone had written with the blue ink, "Nuestro último viaje juntos." I felt a sting behind my eyes. I saw my son's face when I said I was going alone to check routes. I heard my own promises with the voice of this man in the photo. Behind me, in the SUV, something knocked twice on the glass. Not hard, like a child that wants to call Dad from the back seat. I did not turn at once. I stared at the broken road, at the water that ran under it. Then I whispered, "Lo siento," to whoever could hear. When I finally looked back, the handprint was there again, more clear. Fingers spread, pressed to the inside of the rear window. Then, as I watched, it slid down, leaving a trail on the fog until it reached the bottom of the glass and faded. I spent the rest of the night inside the SUV with the seat reclined, the doors unlocked, the phone in my hand. I did not sleep. The engine stayed dead. The crying did not return. The smell of wet clothes remained, soft, like a memory. At the first light, I walked down the road until my phone got a signal. I called 911. A state trooper came first, then a tow truck. They put cones and tape around the gap, as if that would be enough to keep the death away from distracted drivers. The trooper, a tall man with a big belly, shook his head as he looked at the broken bridge. "You are lucky," he said. "We have this section closed, but some signs keep getting moved or stolen. Last year, a family in a minivan went over in a storm. Tourists, out of state. Whole thing got washed down the creek before we found them." He kept talking, some details about rain, about road budgets, about how people ignore warnings. I stopped him. "I get it," I said. "I should not have been here." He gave me a strange look, as if I'd said something else, then wrote my name on his pad and left. The tow truck driver hauled the SUV back to the main highway. Halfway there, the engine came back to life as if nothing had happened. All systems on. Air conditioner cold, radio fine. No one could tell me what had gone wrong. Before I left the rental office in Albuquerque, I cleaned the inside of the car, more out of nerves than respect. On the inside of the rear window where the handprint had been, there was a faint shape that did not go away even with soap. It looked like the mark that wet skin leaves on glass. 3 months after that trip, I left the bus company. I moved to a smaller job, less hours, less pay. That year, we did not go to Disney yet, but I took my wife and my son to the beach for the first time in years. We crossed a bridge over a river, and my hands shook on the steering wheel, but I kept going. I still think of that night in New Mexico. I ask myself if what stopped my car was a defect, a ghost, or my own guilt. I do not know. What I know is that there are pieces of road where time keeps a record of the ones who never got home. And sometimes, in the dark, when a man like me drives alone and far from his family, something in that record reaches out and grabs the wheel. Thanks for being with us tonight. We continue with the next story. The Signal in the Fog. Hello, Mr. Williams. I'm Sam, a long-haul trucker from El Paso, Texas. I've driven across most of the southern U.S., and I thought I'd seen it all: animals crossing at night, freak snowstorms, strange folks walking the shoulders of forgotten roads. But what happened last winter, somewhere near the Louisiana-Mississippi border, still keeps me up at night. It was early December, just after Thanksgiving. I was making a solo overnight run hauling automotive parts from Houston to Atlanta. Nothing fancy. The kind of run I used to take just to clear my head my wife had left a few months prior, and the silence in the cab was better than the silence at home. The job paid decent, but I didn't care much for the money then. I just wanted the road, the hum of the tires, the late-night diners, and the smell of diesel. That night, I took Highway 84 eastbound. It was one of those routes Google suggests when you're running behind fewer way stations, fewer towns, less light, more woods. It was around 1:40 a.m. when the fog rolled in. At first, I didn't think much of it. Fog happens. But this wasn't normal. It came in fast, thick, like a curtain being dropped. I slowed down to 40, flipped on my fog lights, and leaned forward over the wheel. I couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. My dashboard clock flicked to 1:44 when I noticed it. Static. Not on the radio that was already off. The static was coming through the CB, loud, constant, like someone holding down the transmit button with a busted mic. Then it cut out. Total silence. Right after that, the temperature dropped. No breeze, just this sudden cold inside the cab. I checked my vents, they were off. That's when I noticed the condensation on the inside of the windshield. Breath fog, like I wasn't alone. I remembered touching the steering wheel and feeling how cold it had gotten. Ice cold. Then I saw the shape. Just ahead, standing on the shoulder, maybe 5 or 6 feet from the fog line, there was someone, or something, still as a post. I couldn't make out a face or details. Just the outline, tall, too tall. Arms longer than they should be. I flicked the high beams for a second. Nothing changed. It didn't flinch, didn't react. I kept rolling slowly past it, heart pounding, pretending like I hadn't seen it. You do that sometimes out here, ignore it, and hope it ignores you back. About a mile later, I felt something was off again, like a weight in the trailer, but I was empty, light as a feather. Then the CB crackled once more, but this time it wasn't static, it was a voice, a whisper, barely audible. Don't stop. Just that, over and over. Same voice, low, flat, no emotion. Don't stop, don't stop. I shut the CB off, kept driving. And then my headlights caught something ahead. Another shape, standing in the middle of the road this time. Same height, same posture, same dead stillness. I hit the brakes hard, too hard. The truck fishtailed slightly, but I corrected. When I looked up, it was gone. Just not there anymore. I started driving again, slower now, heart racing, palms soaked. I told myself I'd pull over at the next rest stop. Just sleep it off. Only there wasn't a next rest stop. The GPS kept glitching. First, it said 20 miles to the nearest stop, then 60, then 30 again. It looped, froze, restarted. That's when I noticed the road signs. Every few miles, same sign. Welcome to Langston. Population 1412. Only problem? Langston isn't on the map. I checked later, it doesn't exist. Not in Mississippi, not in Louisiana, not anywhere. But that night, I saw that sign 6 times. And then, out of nowhere, the fog lifted. I was back on a wide-open highway. No shapes, no static, no signs. By 4 a.m., I'd made it to a truck stop outside Meridian. I got out, legs weak, lungs tight. I asked the guy inside if he'd ever heard of Langston. He looked at me like I was drunk. Never heard of it. I slept there, in the cab, with the doors locked and the CB unplugged. Since then, I've never taken Highway 84 again. But sometimes, when I'm on quiet back roads in the early morning, and the fog gets a little too thick, I hear it again. Don't stop. That whisper. scratching at the edge of the static. "Mr. Williams, if you ever hear that on your radio, turn around. Please,